Welcome to the Gone Jeepin' Show with your hosts, Rick Payway and Tracy Clark. Grab your favorite beverage, kick back, put your feet up, and have a listen. On episode 5 of the Gone Jeepin' Show, in Jeep Eat, we've got the new Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer. And is it still a Jeep? Lockers before light bars. We answer a fan's question about driving cross country and then tackling the Rubicon Trail. Willys versus Wrangler. Forced induction versus naturally aspirated. Toolbox talk. Don't wait until trail day to inspect these items. All Jeep all the time. Stay the trail and don't be a doofus in the group.
Welcome to the 5th episode of the Gone Jeepin' Show. I'm your host, Rick Payway.
And I'm your co-host, Tracy Clark.
Today, we have most of our crew with us: Tyler Donaldson, Greg Henderson, Chris Collard, Michael Harrington, and Liam Lafferty. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing good. Very good.
Reason all getting ready for Moab is what we're going to be doing, but we've got all sorts of stuff to talk about first. First thing I want to talk about is about the new Wagoneer Grand Wagoneer. It just got released, and it's pretty impressive. The question is it still a Jeep?
I don't think so.
Tracy says no. Chris?
Does it say Jeep on it?
Pretty interesting that it doesn't say Jeep anywhere on it.
Right.
And the paperwork says something to the effect of the Grand Wagoneer is an extension of the Jeep brand. So it's still falling under Jeep, and you still have the same people talking about it at Jeep. But clearly, Stellantis is not going to be marketing it as a Jeep. I didn't see any trail-rated badges on it either. I think the most exciting thing was the guy going through a mud puddle. He stopped and he freaked out and then turned a knob in the console and got across. So it kind of worries me about not being in the Jeep family, yet still trying to say its roots are there. What do you think, Greg?
Well, as I move my camera around, if you want to see the real roots, they're back there. That's a real Jeep. It's still a real Jeep. But the new one, I don't know. I haven't had the opportunity to drive one or test one yet, and I don't know what they'll do. But I think the further that they get away from the originality of Jeep, I think it hurts each individual vehicle. So bring back an old one, and I'll be really excited. The new one, I don't know. It's kind of like a Suburban.
Suburban-esque, yes. One other interesting item was that it's in the paperwork that I actually read, it said it was body-on-frame construction, which
that's good.
I was quite shocked, and I'm not quite sure I believe that.
Yeah, I'll have to crawl over one. I know there's some right up the street, so maybe I'll go take a look at one. But if it's still body-on-frame, I'll actually appreciate that.
Yep.
Well, I can attest to the fact that they're huge. I mean, they're up here. I've seen one. I've been almost up close and personal with it, but it's big. It's really big.
Yeah, they are huge. Another thing is it's both the Wagoneer / Grand Wagoneer. So what is the difference?
Well, engine
engine
displacement.
Sport where it's just a couple stickers that make it different, or do they actually put some different components underneath it?
Apparently different components, like Tracy said, engine displacement. You get in the 6.4 in the Grand Wagoneer, and I believe the 5.7 Hemi in the regular Wagoneer. So obviously there's going to be a host of other things along with that. Also, the Wagoneer can be had in a 4x2 version, a 2-wheel drive version. And Jeep hasn't made a 2-wheel drive vehicle in quite some time. I think the last they had some JKs. And of course, no JLs that I'm aware of, unless they're some sort of funny mules. And then you got to look at the price. Sure, it's luxurious, but starting price, I just went on the Stellantis site, and it starts at $68,000.
Oh,
that's for the Wagoneer.
That's for the Wagoneer, right? And that's cheaper than a 392. Yeah, exactly. So who has an extra $68,000 to start? And then for the Wagoneer starts at $88 and goes up from
That's
there.
the Grand Wagoneer.
Right, Grand Wagoneer.
Yeah.
Starts at $88, goes up to like $110 or something like that.
So I'm interested
I
in
don't
the
know.
reasons behind not having. We noticed that way back when they did the backgrounder on it, it didn't have Jeep on it. They weren't pushing it as a Jeep product. So is it that the brand is trying to break that away to let it fit into more of the luxury SUV Range Rover class, and not saying Jeep? Because sometimes some of those people that might want to buy that type of vehicle, they're not thinking Jeep. Jeeps are for people that want to go, I don't know, into the backcountry. They want something to go skiing in.
But that might be a really good thing for us in the long term if they're not branding it Jeep. 2 minutes after it leaves the dealership lot, the value might tank. So we might be able to buy one in 2 years that was a $60,000 car today, and it's only going to be $25,000.
Exactly. And that's actually something, because I was watching some of the press release. There's a few things I like about it. One is that it's only got a V8 option, which is kind of fun. Two, the goofy airbag suspension gives you at least 10 inches of ground clearance, which for driving in the snow and getting to and from your high profile job isn't bad. And then I do like that they didn't put the word Jeep on it, because it's their attempt on getting into a completely different market as a company as a whole, not necessarily for the Jeep brand. And it's super obvious by the interior, where you have on the Grand Wagoneer, I think it was 72 inches of screen space, which basically Jeeps are, hey, I don't even need a screen because my screen is the windshield because where I'm going is gorgeous. The Grand Wagoneer is, hey, my life kind of sucks anyway, so why not have a screen on my dash so I can watch other people have fun? And that's what
distracted driving at its best.
Well, that's an interesting thing. They have the
shielded.
Passenger one has their own screen. Passenger has their own screen, so they could be the co-pilot, I believe they said, and help with
navigator. Yeah.
Yep. While watching Netflix.
I've seen original Wagoneers on the side of cliffs towing campers. I don't know if the new one's going to keep up with that.
Yeah. What do you think, Tyler?
Well, they marketed it with a sailboat. I mean,
well, and then jumping horses in the reveal. They're walking down this long barn, and you see them walking their fancy horses around and loading them into the trailer and going off to their 3-day eventing. And
so if it's body on frame, I would be interesting to see how well it tows, especially with the airbag suspension. If it's got like a self-leveling system in it, like the Tahoe's had from the factory, and it is body on frame, it might be a decent tow rig, although no diesel option, right?
No.
And wasn't it rated at 10,000 pounds?
10,000 pounds. And I couldn't figure out whether that was the 4x2 version, the 4x4 version. You have to really dig deep into the information to figure that all out, which I just haven't had enough time.
Yeah. I'm going to probably take a hard pass.
Mike, how about you?
Well, for what I do, I'll take one if I could afford one.
Put all your gear in it?
Yeah, that's it. Crew and gear to get to the trailhead. I'll depend on you guys to get me to the tough spot. Yeah, I'd go for it.
Yeah, I didn't see any tow hooks on it, so you'd be pushing too. Well, overall, I think they have done a nice job. They're touting America this, America that, and for a foreign country or foreign company, can't really say exactly what country they're from. The French, or the Belgium, or the Dutch, right?
They're across the pond.
They're across the pond. So regardless, I think they're doing all right. In the reveal, they did have Jim Morrison, vice president of Jeep, and he was talking about it, said he liked it. So right there, that gives me a little bit more better feeling about it. The lack of a trail-rated badge or the word Jeep anywhere, kind of interesting.
We haven't haven't had any seat time in it, obviously. But I mean, in my opinion, it's like they need to do it. The reasons behind not having a badge Jeep, that's their thing. They want to hit that luxury market. But based on what we're seeing coming out of the brand out of Jeep these days, I mean, I think it's going to be a super luxurious, high quality, reliable product, something that would be awesome for a road trip across the country. You're not going to be doing the Rubicon with it, but that's what the Wrangler's for.
So luxury overlanding, you can go from hotel to hotel on pavement and the occasional dirt road.
Right, because they have a knob on the console.
So one question, Rick, you've looked up a lot of the stats for it. Does it have a solid rear axle or is it independent all the way around?
I did not even bother to find out because I'll almost guarantee you it's going to be independent all the way around. In fact,
I remember from the bucks I've seen,
I think
it's all wheel.
Yeah, it's all floppy wheel.
Yeah, if I remember from the bucks I've seen. Yeah.
Gracie, on the ones that you saw, did you happen to notice anything sticking under the rear?
I was getting the evil eye from the mule drivers that were there.
You didn't check the gender?
I didn't lift its skirt. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, we'll probably find out in Moab in due time.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if they would have something there. And speaking of Moab, we did have a little sneak peek of just grill and hood renderings for concepts. So I'm kind of curious as to whether or not they have maybe a Wagoneer based concept, because if you read down through the press release, there was some stuff on Mopar and Stellantis, etc. So I'm wondering if they may come out with something on the Wagoneer, Grand Wagoneer platform as a concept
for this year.
For this year, yeah.
Yep, could be interesting. We'll find out.
You're going to find out.
We'll find out. Check back with us, and we'll let you know what we find.
Absolutely. So we're going to segue into lockers before light bars. We've got a question from Instagram from John Lee, and he goes by John Lee _Rhino_Rubicon. Says, I'm really digging the podcast. I have a 2017 JKU Rubicon I ordered and picked up in January of 2017. It was my first Jeep, and I can't really see ever getting rid of it. I'm still very new, but have gone to a few places to wheel. Here in Texas, all you really have are parks, but I did get to Colorado and to the Hot Springs, Arkansas park. One topic I would love to hear y'all cover is something that is on my bucket list. Being relatively new to Jeeping, it's easy to get caught up in all the must-have mods. I want to do the Rubicon in the next 2 years. What advice would you give a new Jeeper for the proper way to prepare for this trail if you plan on driving cross-country, wheeling the trail, and then driving home? Preparing the vehicle, tools for the trip, planning itself, and any other nuggets of wisdom for how to make this kind of trip successful would be great to hear. I will listen up and see if y'all cover it.
That's actually a great question. Yeah, that's
a great question.
And here's the key thing that John has done. He almost answered his own question right here, because the title of this is Lockers Before Light Bars. Guess what? He bought a Rubicon that comes with lockers front and rear. So he's halfway there. And I dare say that driving over the Rubicon many, many times the past decades, I would say the vehicle that he has would not need any special equipment to traverse that trail if he has some experience in driving. With that said,
he said he's fairly new. I mean,
right, he is fairly new. So yeah, there's a few tips and tricks that he's going to have, and I would not tackle that trail without having at least some good tools, some recovery gear, and that sort of thing. Tracy, what would you say are the first top 5 things he needs?
Well, first off, I would say no less than 35-inch tall tires. He did not let us know how his Jeep is equipped. He didn't tell us if he's got a lift or, if he's done those upgrades. I would say 35 just to be safe. Definitely a spare tire. I have seen so many people going out without spare tires. Second thing, a wheeling partner. Don't do this trail alone.
Mm-hmm. In other words, another vehicle, not a person in a seat.
Exactly. For me, doing the Rubicon for the first time, I would highly suggest maybe signing up to go along with Nina. She does guided trips. So you've got somebody who knows the obstacles. Or sign up for Jeep Jamboree or Jeepers Jamboree, one or the other, or JJ USA. Go out with somebody who knows the trail for sure. Definitely recovery gear. Make sure that, you get a good once over before you start the trail. You've driven cross country. Make sure that nothing shook loose. Go through, tighten all the bolts and nuts, and make sure there's no leaks and water. Take plenty of water.
Plenty of water.
Yeah, hydrate.
And for that matter, a pet kit. Basically, when you're on the Rubicon, there are very limited facilities, so you want to take your waste out with you. Don't forget. One thing you don't want to do is leave white flowers out on the trail. In other words, toilet paper.
Yeah, no trail daisies.
No trail daisies. All right, Chris, how about you? Since you've done it yourself, you live up by the Rubicon.
Yeah, so I want to spin off of what Tracy said about going with other people. Definitely good idea. First time I was up there, 1984, we just drove up looking for a club that was supposed to be up there, and we never found them. So we just did the trail on our own. We were like, okay, well, there's tracks this way. Let's go that way. So, John could hook up with a local club. Obviously, JJ Jeepers Jamboree or JJ USA do some great runs. But I would hook up with a local club or a couple of local people and plan on doing it midweek rather than a weekend. You get rid of about 80% of the crowd. There'll still be people there because all the people, we'll go up midweek and we run into people from Arkansas or Maine or Canada because they're coming in and, spending a week to come out and do the trail. So I would also give yourself time. You definitely don't want to race through it. I mean, stop in Georgetown one night, get a room at the Georgetown Hotel, which is like this classic place where people can do a coin toss into the spittoon for a beer. Give yourself time to enjoy it. Plan on, camping near Spider Lake or near Buck Island. Great camping spots there down by the Rubicon Springs. And if you can, spend 2 nights in Rubicon Springs. Beautiful place in the summertime to splash in the river. And time is the big thing. And go ahead, Rick.
No, I was saying take your time. Take 3 days at least to do it rather than try to rush through in 2 or 1. I mean, I've done it like in 7 hours, but I had to get to an airport as well.
Sure.
Don't do that. Go and enjoy. That's the idea.
Yeah. And the other thing that I'd like to say is since he is relatively new, don't drive above your ability. There are options to get around some of the more technical stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the things. It's like any trail. To me, it's like you leave your ego at home. And, the fact that you're driving across the country, you're going to do a fairly technical trail and then drive home. Most people go into that with a mentality. It's like, this vehicle's got to get me back to Texas, which is a big deal. I mean, I almost drive everywhere I go, my trail rig, and, it gives you a little bit different. You don't take as many silly risks if there's a trailer sitting at the trailhead waiting for you. So the other thing is, Rick, and you've done a lot of these trails. If you're coming all the way out across the country, there's some other really great trails in really close proximity to the Rubicon. You got Barrett Lake, which is, an hour away from Loon Lake. That's a great trail. And
that's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. We were up there last year.
You're not supposed to tell people about that trail.
What trail?
Doesn't exist.
No. Yeah. But there are other trails. If you come out in August, first part of August, you could do Jeepers Jamboree or Jeep Jamboree on the Rubicon. You could go over to its sister trail, which is the Fordyce Trail, which is an hour away. So out here, we're really lucky. We got a lot of really, really iconic trails very close by. So if you're coming out and you got time, time is the Jeepers friend.
Yeah, no doubt. Tyler, what's your ideas?
I would echo the 35-inch tires, but I would also say make sure they extend out past your fender flares slightly. They will bounce you off of you got to understand the Rubicon Trail is 3 days of being smashed between a boulder the size of a Volkswagen and a tree that's as big around as an elephant, and you're going to hit one or the other. And so if your tires stick out past your fender flares just a little bit, they'll kind of bounce you and push you off of stuff. I made the mistake of doing that trail in an XJ with 33 1050s.
Skinny.
Because I had to drive all the way out there from Utah. And so I figured, skinning your tires, it'll be better. I really wish I'd left the 1250s on there that stuck out slightly, because I nearly tore off all of my fender flares. The other thing, he's from Texas. The Rubicon is at altitude. And at altitude, you dehydrate faster. It's harder to breathe. Mm-hmm. So you need to drink more water than you're used to drinking. And I would say, like Rick said, give yourself at least 3 days to do that trail. You don't want to rush the trail. It's beautiful country. You don't want to be wheeling it in the dark, trying to push hard. And the other thing I would say is, especially if you're new to Jeeping, don't do that trail without a spotter, and a spotter who knows what they're doing. And whether that's with going through with a club of other vehicles, or you take somebody who's very experienced with you, do not try that trail without a spotter if you're not really capable and competent driving your Jeep.
Yep, those are good thoughts.
Definitely. Yeah, I will say, and John, you know all about them because you live in Texas. There are rattlesnakes up there and they can get angry. So definitely don't go wandering off the trail alone. If you're taking your pets up there, don't let them run loose, because it's awfully hard to get to a hospital if you get snake bit.
And you could also check, we've got a really good hammer repeater system up on the Rubicon, and you can check on the Rubicon Trail Foundation site. We can probably post that on the bottom of this podcast, but it's basically RubiconTrailFoundation.org, I believe. And they've got a ton of information, maps, all your comms frequencies, information about, when there are exclusive use permits or parade permits, which is when they do the jamboree events. So yeah, right. Good resources.
Because basically when they're doing the Jeepers Jamboree and stuff, that section of the trail for that day is closed to the general public because it's a permitted event. Are there people on the trail? Well, of course. But the idea is to keep those events together for the good of everybody. Liam, what are your thoughts? You're relatively new. I don't think you've even been on the Rubicon, right?
Body armor and a heavy foot. No, I've never been to the Rubicon. That's horrible advice. No, I like what Chris said about the information of the area and communications. That's the one thing I do. Any of the off-roading I've done has been far away, and I drive my Jeep there. And the biggest thing is, you forget something or something goes wrong. It's nice to either know people in the area or know how to contact people in the area. So finding a friend or just knowing how to contact services is huge.
Yeah. I remember one time I was rushing through, again, had to go to an airplane, came across a Scout with a broken rear drive shaft. And sure enough, he did not know how to fix it. And I helped him get it off the trail and then backtracked about half a mile where I just saw one of my friends and said, "Hey, I can't help this guy. Can you handle him?" And he says, "Yeah, we'll do it." So you will find friends, new friends out on the trail. That's what you say. You don't always have to run all the way back into town to fix that U-joint. Fortunately, my friend also had a U-joint. And of course, he bugs me all the time now because I left him to fix somebody else's problem. But yeah, you will make new friends on the trail. Mike, how about you?
Well, I tackled the Rubicon Trail in my stock 97 TJ in 99. And,
28.
Yeah. And it was quite interesting. It was just a buddy of mine and I, and we were told you can start here. And here was looking up at a granite face and following oil marks. But then you'd get so far and find out there's a crevice there that you can't clear, so you have to backtrack. And then we ended up in some very deep water that went on forever. It was an optical illusion because of the way the trees grew over the body of water. And one guy that told us how to get in was like, make sure you hug to the left, because if you're on the right, it goes way deeper. Then his buddy says, no, you have to hug the right. It goes deeper on the left, which made it very kind of scary getting in. But we made it in, and we were in there about 3 days and camping, and got a little body damage. But coming out, we crushed my gas tank coming off a ledge, so we had to stop and repair that with soap and duct tape. And then we sheared the oil pan plug off of the oil pan and puked out all of our oil. And then and the story goes on and on and on, way too long. But it involves policemen and bears, and somebody came to rescue us. And
this sounds like one of our trail report stories.
Yeah, we'll save it for that. But so what I would add to what you said, or just echo some of this, let people know where you're going. Our wives knew where we're going. They actually called and put emergency rescue on standby because they didn't hear from us for 3 or 4 days. So let people know where you're going. Yes, you should go with a buddy. Yes, you should have the right tools. I would say also carry bear spray, because we did come up on a set of footprints in the snow that had fresh bear tracks.
That's good.
There's a lot.
Also, maybe carry some extra oil too, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we made it back into town, and we got 7 quarts of oil and a gasket and the whole thing, and made it back and repaired and got out of there.
I want to jump back into John's question and something that you mentioned, Mike. So Rubicon Trail Foundation, through fundraising and grants, they put in a number of toilets. And so these are the big concrete block toilets. They have a special crew that'll come in and pump them out. So the white flower is super important. Rick mentioned like a pet toilet, little tent with the potty that has like the wag bags in it. Those are awesome. Set them at camp. Your wife is going to love it because she's not going to be like walking out trying to find a place to go potty. And I mean, it's required now. It's kind of like river rafting on the Rubicon, is we got to take care of this area. Otherwise, we're going to lose it. And the other thing is they have a great kiosk right at the beginning of the trail at Lynn Lake Trailhead. And somebody staffs it during the summertime, during the months, and they have oil spill kits and the pet toilet bags. And those are all paid for, and they're free, and they're paid for from the grant funding program in California.
Yeah. So John, I think some of these ideas you might take to heart, because the Rubicon is not just a regular trail. Greg, any thoughts?
Yeah. One, all the thoughts before me were great. A couple of John's really good not problems, but really good things that he has. He bought a Rubicon. It's a 2017 JKU. I'm assuming 4-door. I don't know if it said that or not. In stock trim, his Jeep can do the trail if he takes his time and is very careful. I would, if you're leaving it stock and you're not putting bigger tires on it and you're not doing a lift, upgrade your skid plates. There's a million different companies that sell phenomenal skid plates. Update them. If you are driving across the country, I'd say go with a very reputable suspension. There's a lot on the market today. You've got AEV and Terraflex and Rockcrawler and all these different brands. A 2017 JKU, 3-inch lift will get you 35s. You might not even need to re-gear if you're an automatic and you're running a normal 35 and you have 410 gears in your Rubicon. So,
because it's a Rubicon.
Right. Might not need to do a lot of modifications to the vehicle, but protect your vehicle. Just like everybody else said, bring tools, bring spill kits, bring, all of the normal off-roading accessories. I always recommend everybody bring a first aid kit, and don't get a cheap first aid kit. Spend $100 or $200 and get a real first aid kit for somewhere you're going to be gone for 3 days. You're going to be deep into a trail. Be prepared for that. Hydrate, just like everybody else said. But the bonus is the vehicle that he has. He bought a very, very capable vehicle. So it's got rock rails, it's got lockers, it's got sway bar disconnect. It's actually going to be a pretty easy trail compared to Mike in his 97 TJ doing the same trail. A little bit of altitude adjustment with a nice lift and a set of 35 is definitely going to go a long way and help. But I would still recommend not skimp on some of those skid plates. Gas tank on a JKU is huge and down the passenger side, and they take a good beating. Put a skid plate over it. You'll protect it. It will help you get home. Same thing with any of the other armor. First modification that I would recommend, do a bumper and a winch. Give yourself some good recovery points, and a winch is a huge one. And again, there's a lot of companies that make them. We all know Warren. Warren makes a great winch. There's a lot of other companies that make winches. It's great to have that along with your recovery gear before you do light bars and other things. If you're driving during the day, you don't need additional lighting. If he plans on doing it at night, a nice set of aftermarket LED headlights goes way further than some light bars in a lot of situations, so just enjoy it, but take the time. Don't try and make the Rubicon Trail a fast trip. If most people are telling you 3 days, schedule 5. That gives you extra in and out in case something bad does happen. Also, it lets you enjoy the scenery. But I think it's a great trip, and I think John will really have a lot of fun with it, especially with all of these wonderful suggestions that people have made. But just go prepared, bring your camping stuff, and enjoy it. Take your time. You'll love it. It's a beautiful trail.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everybody. Tracy, what do you think?
Hey, Rick, let me just throw one more thing in there, guys. And, actually, check fire restrictions. We in Northern California are fire central, and you just got to absolutely adhere to whatever the Forest Service is telling us as far as fire restrictions. On that note, it can be cold. Rubicon is between 6,000 and 7,000 feet and in elevation, and it can be cold. And if you aren't allowed to have a fire, you're going to need to have some warm clothes. Or cooking wise, you can cook on a Coleman stove or a gas barbecue, but you can't cook with fire restrictions. You can't cook on charcoal. You can't cook over the fire. So something to think about.
And then also, I'd like to mention, if you don't mind, my troubles, Bear and I's trouble really began because of snow on Little Sluice towards the end of June. So
that's June. Yeah, there are times when there's still snow around there in July. I've seen that. Well, it can come as early in September.
Yeah, that part of the country is a lot like where I live. You can get snow any time of the year.
Yep.
With the elevations, the humidity levels, and it's got to chill down. I have been in a whiteout blizzard, not 20 minutes from my house on the 30th of July. 10 inches of snow in an hour and a half.
Yep. So bottom line, be prepared.
Yes.
Make sure you throw on that jacket, that space heater, that everything else you need. You'll need it.
So this is a good segue into trailside. And we're not going to talk about a trail because we just talked about a trail. I want to talk about our favorite engine food, the best way to cook it, and favorite trail snacks. We've all heard about the manifold burritos and stuff like that. Do you wrap it once in foil, twice in foil? Do you do like Rick used to do, just buy a frozen pizza at the convenience store and pop it on top? And if the plastic melts, oh, well, it's just that much more fiber.
Well, all of those things aren't true. Okay. And yeah, I've been cooking forever trail food on an engine. And the most common one, of course, is the burrito. And you ask your question, do you wrap it once or twice? And it depends mainly on whether you have fuel injection or carburation. Yes, seriously, because with fuel injection, there's generally no fumes or fluids dripping around in the engine compartment. So you can wrap up a beautiful tortilla with meat and the cheese and everything else and beans and wrap it once in foil and put it on the manifold and you're okay. If you have a carburetor and you're doing some trail work, you want to do it twice because you're probably going to get some sloppy fuel.
No, that's when you buy the convenience store burrito because that's the only thing that will add flavor to it.
Well, that's true too. And that's the thing. I've used Hot Pockets quite a bit because they're quick, they're easy. You put it on a manifold and generally they don't melt. So one thing to remember. So yeah, that's my favorite. I've cooked the eggs, make a little can. And
now I recall we were coming across northern Arizona on a trip, stopped at Grand Falls, and had the best TJ barbecue ribs ever.
On a TJ, absolutely.
On a TJ.
Yep. Jim Huff out of Huff's 4-Wheel Drive in Las Cruces, New Mexico, made up his ribs, wrapped them all up. I don't know how long. It wasn't like from New Mexico to Arizona, but I think it was that morning. Absolutely phenomenal. And one thing to remember about an engine is it's slow heat, but it's dry heat because there's no moisture there. You got to make sure that whatever you're making is sealed so it steams itself inside.
You know what else Jim made that, and I don't like hot dogs. I can't stand them, but Jim makes the best manifold hot dogs in the world.
There you go. There's something about a Jeep engine. How about you, Greg?
Best we ever did was a 15-pound brisket.
Ooh.
So it was a trip from Michigan all the way to Roush Creek in Pennsylvania.
That sounds like enough cooking time.
Yeah, it was 10 and a half hours one way, and 15-pound brisket wrapped laboriously with aluminum foil right on top of the manifold. And that, I think the average temperature, because the gentleman who I was with even had a meat thermometer into the cab so he could monitor the temperature. I think the average temperature was about 160 degrees and
perfect.
It took 10 hours. And when we got there, you could peel it apart with a fork. It was delicious.
Yep.
Talk about low and slow. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while, the best part was every once in a while we're going down I-80 and it was before they restored some of the road and you'd hit a really big pothole and where you had it situated, the drippings would fall off and hit the exhaust and the whole cabin would smell like it for 10 minutes.
That's awesome.
Really, really hungry.
That's cool. Liam, have you done any manifold cooking?
You know, I tried when I had my Jeep out in Moab, but I didn't leave it there for very long. We got impatient. But I will tell you that my favorite trailside food is free food. And on that same trip, I had brought no food. Well, I had like a bag of nuts. No food, but every tool I owned. And when someone broke down on the trail and they needed power tools to fix their Jeep, I was there like that. I fixed their Jeep. And when it came time for lunch, they gave me a sandwich and they gave my passenger a sandwich as well. So sometimes tools can equal food.
Yep, there you go. We'll work for food. I'll give you a sign. But you, Mike?
Tell the truth, I haven't done a lot of engine cooking, but I'll say right now, get rid of the bread and bring the tortillas. Whenever I bring a loaf of bread, by the time I get down the trail, it's just smushed flat. So use the tortillas. Now, one of the reasons I didn't really go for the engine cooking deal was, Rick, do you remember a driver by the name of Matt that came out on one of those events that we shot together? And he was taking his can of soup and he was putting it somewhere on the engine. And then lo and behold, this Toyota that he's driven everywhere and runs great suddenly started having battery problems. Do you remember this?
It died every time he tried to go up a certain angle on a certain hill. And you get back level, it'd run fine. Just that one certain angle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so what was his can of food doing that caused
it? Was
that?
Rolling back and shorting out the coil. to the point that finally it burned a hole in the can.
Oh, man.
It was great. Yeah. I think it was beans, though, and they were pretty good.
he bought new batteries. He troubleshot this. He undid that. And anyway.
As soon as it got level, the can would roll, and the connection was broken. Yeah.
Yep.
So be careful of how you do engine cooking and what materials. I have seen some guys, especially in Pacific Northwest, they'll take a larger coffee can back when they were metal and weld them to their headers. So all they had to do is take the can, put it in the can, and they're safe. Nothing happened. And there's also some commercial type cookers where you run your heater hoses through this box, and the box then just heats up the food. I don't know if they're still around, but they used to be.
Well, I just saw
that. Go ahead, Mike.
I just came across a B-roll shot of an engine, and I think it might have been Mike Picard's from Fall Color Tour, where he had a basket welded there, just a little wire basket that he could drop his burritos in. I think that was his rig.
That wasn't Mike's. I believe that was Evans's.
Yeah.
But they do a lot of engine cooking. A lot of those guys do. Rick, do you remember the one on Evans's Blueberry? That was the one that was connected to the heater hoses, and it ran through, and it was a really nice setup.
It's a great way to do it, I gotta admit. One thing to note is on most modern vehicles where they have the plastic armor shield over the engine so that you can't see it, they sometimes don't make enough heat. You have to get underneath that thing to get your food in there so it'll actually cook. I've had cold burritos after a day of driving because of that.
Yeah, but we had great bread cheese on the JL engine.
JL, yep, you do it right, it'll work. Mm-hmm. You were saying something, Chris?
Yeah, as far as like plug and play options for manifold burritos, Black Forest Products makes a manifold box, like bolts on a JK or a JL with a 3.6 in it. So, and they work
to go
with those guys. And we loaded them up in the morning with a bunch of burritos, and that was lunch.
Perfect.
I can tell you that you don't want to wrap up fish with garlic and onions and all that good stuff like you'd cook it in the fire in the coals and put it on your manifold, because when it leaks, it doesn't smell great when it comes to the cab.
Now, Rick did lobster tail and corn on the cob.
Absolutely epic. Now that was, I believe, on my CJ17, which has an LS in it.
No, it was not.
Plenty of room. No, it wasn't.
No, that was on Push Me Pull You when you were coming back from Maine, because you picked up lobster tails and then you picked up corn coming through Iowa, because you asked me
East Coast trip.
Because you were asking me about the corn and the lobster, and I said just make sure you put a couple ice cubes in with it so it'll steam real well.
Right. Again, the engine is a dry heat, so you want to make sure you get that extra moisture in there.
Tyler, do you have a favorite manifold food or trail food?
You know, I've never really done any manifold cooking. The only thing I would say is if you throw a soup can in there, be careful where you put it, because they can build up enough pressure to explode. I've had a couple of those go off like a grenade at scout camps because somebody stuck them in the fire and didn't poke a hole in them. So that'd be my only caution. But I just have never really tried very much manifold cooking. You guys have really got me curious now, though. I want to try some stuff.
Well, it's really interesting because I've taken raw meat, just go to the store and buy it, cut it in strips, roll it up in the tortilla with the beans and everything else, and it'll actually cook it. It won't overcook it as long as you're not on your exhaust manifold. That's the wrong manifold. But on an intake, it's enough heat. Yeah, get it up to 165 degrees, cooks it through, and don't got to worry about it. And lobster, corn, whatever you want.
Maybe we should have a manifold cook-off contest sometime.
I was thinking Moab.
You'd love that, right?
Now we're talking.
You'll bring the tools.
I was thinking Moab. If we're all going on the same trail ride one day, we ought to just start out in the morning by prepping our dinner, and then, of course, at the end of the day,
we could have like a full on. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a 7-course meal.
We turn into a buffet at the lunch stop or at the end of the trail or some gorgeous vista. Just break it all out and
yeah. Instead of ice cream for dessert, we'll have to have some sort of a cake, like a Dutch oven.
Oh yeah,
apple crumbles.
Lava
That's
cake.
what we got to try.
Lava cake would be good, but I'm thinking turtle s'mores.
Something like that, yeah. Doesn't
Well,
take a lot of
I have multiple of those Dometic fridge freezers, and I always bring them. So, we could just have a really good smorgasbord of food and then have ice cream at the end of the trail.
All righty.
We could do that too.
Getting hungry.
Strawberry shortcakes.
Mm.
All right. Who's ready for a little controversy? Shall we go head to head with Willys versus Wrangler?
Sure.
All right. This is going to be Rick Payway against Liam, and we've got forced induction versus naturally aspirated. We're going to let Liam take the lead because I have a feeling he kind of won the last Willys versus Wrangler. So winner leads off.
Okay, well, I appreciate that you think I won. Man, I have been debating this exact topic in my mind the last few days because if you didn't know, I'm supercharging my 4-cylinder YJ right now, and I'm doing it with the most backwards materials and tools and kind of blazing my own trail right now. So, if you would have asked me a couple days ago, I said forced induction's the best. And then if you would have asked me yesterday, I would have said, screw it. I want a carburetor and I want naturally aspirated and and I just want it to go. Yesterday was not a good day. But I'm back. I'm back to the forced induction today because had some success this morning. So I guess I'll start off with a quick description of what I'm talking about. Forced induction, I'm going to be referring to just the two most common. You've got your supercharger and your turbo. I'm sure you could run compressed air in there some other way if you wanted to, but that's what we're going to talk about. And then, of course, naturally aspirated is an engine without something pushing air. There are some serious benefits to forced induction. Technically, you are going to be running more efficiently because you're putting in more air than your engine can suck in naturally. And so by doing that, mathematically, your efficiency actually goes over 100, if I remember correct. However, in practice, especially in a DIY setup, you might actually end up with worse gas mileage because you have to protect for knock. So I do want to preface this. A lot of the newer vehicles that have a turbo built into them, they are going to be more efficient because they have the computer systems that are capable of controlling that. But in a DIY setup like what I'm doing, I'm anticipating to get way worse gas mileage. And that is offset by the amount of fun. It's more power for the same engine. So that's, do I really need to say more? What do you got, Rick?
Well, yeah, I think you do need to say more. And the problem with supercharging or turbocharging is not the process itself, but everything that goes around it. You mentioned that your naturally aspirated engine can't suck in enough air. Well, in a way, that's true, except for the fact that it's the air pressure itself that is forcing itself into the engine. So rather than a suction, it's more of a vacuum. Same concept. And for those that don't know what naturally aspirated means, that means normal breathing at sea level, where most of us are. And when you go up in altitude, the air is less dense. Less dense air means less power because you have that stoichiometric ratio of 14:1, where you want to have exactly 14 parts air, which not just oxygen, of course, to 1 part gasoline, which is 0.069 something. So if you have it in the correct ratio, your engine runs just fine, right? You go up in altitude, like at, say, airplanes. If you're at 18,000 feet, you have half the amount of air available. So, of course, you're going to be running rich and you're not going to be developing as much power. So that's why airplanes, of course, any piston-driven airplane that operates in the 20,000 or above feet are generally supercharged or turbocharged. Then you have to look at the difference between the two. A turbocharger is a supercharger. All that means is you're forcing air into the engine, which in the words forced induction. So if you have a good setup that pumps a bunch of air in there, you get better performance, more power, and life is good, except for your caveats. Number one, it builds heat. Now you have to do something with the heat. A turbocharger works because exhaust drives a turbine and forces air into the system, and there's where your power is. Whereas supercharger is generally belt driven from the crankshaft through like a Roots type blower mounted on top. You know, you've all seen the hot rod cars with all kinds of stuff sticking through the hood. Well, that's generally a supercharger. And those are really cool, make a beautiful gear whine, and really get you down the road. Fuel economy is not the best, but power is there. So again, the basic concepts are fine. It's when you have to control everything with computers and wires and everything else, which is one of the things that you're running into right now, which makes a naturally aspirated engine more reliable. And of course, I always like reliability. You can always have bigger pistons if you want more power. So what you're doing is a completely do-it-yourself setup, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And you really nailed it right on the head as far as the differences. I do want to, as we're still kind of describing the processes a little bit. Hold on, my dog is chewing on this. It's quite loud. Anyway, as we're talking about the processes a little bit, a lot of people will say, well, I don't like turbo lag. Well, that's fair. And you can control that. And there's a whole bunch of science behind it. And you can figure out turbo lag. But really what's happening is your turbochargers run off your exhaust gas, and you just think it takes time for that exhaust gas to spin the turbine, etc. Whereas a supercharger is directly attached to your crank. So you're going to be building additional air, or basically you're adding displacement to your engine because you're adding more air into that piston. You're building that right at the beginning. And so I guess for me, when I was picking, how do I want my 4-cylinder to maintain the speed limit? I mean, go fast. No. Anyway, when I was picking that, a lot of people have the turbo set up, but the supercharger takes your power curve. So if you put it on a dyno and you have that curve, it takes it and it just lifts it up. It's really not changing a lot of your power curve. Whereas a turbo, it's kind of the same, and then whoop, oh, you got more power, which is awesome for street applications, but absolutely garbage for off-road applications, because you might be getting in the throttle on obstacle and suddenly hit that extra boost of power, and well, now you've just lost all traction. What a shame. So that's kind of where the supercharger is really coming in, and was a real advantage to me when I was picking it, because it can take that torque curve and it can just raise it straight up, which is, I like where my engine builds power currently, but I just wish it had more. The other thing is, one of the downsides, I guess, would be premium fuel. So the biggest thing is knock. And what knock is it's detonation that isn't controlled. Basically, like a diesel engine doesn't have a spark plug, and it does so by compressing the air fuel mixture. And it's also kind of warm in there, and that ignites it. And there's little explosions that happen all over the place, which is why diesel engines are built like twice as thick. They're huge to control that uncontrolled detonation. Gasoline engines are not built that way. So if you have knock anywhere in that cylinder, you can really, really reduce the life of your engine. And what people will do is they'll either retard the timing, they can increase the octane, which is, a lot of people think octane makes a better fuel. It's just a resistance to detonation. That's all octane is. It prevents it from igniting. So if you don't have a supercharged engine and it runs on 87, don't put 89 in there thinking it's going to run better, unless you're trying to avoid ethanol, for various reasons we talked about with carbureted engines. And then the last one is you can just dump more fuel in there, which will keep the cylinder temperatures down, and it prevents that the pre-detonation or the uncontrolled detonation. So if you're in a place where you can't retard your timing and you can't control your fuel, then you're putting higher octane fuel in, say like 91, or I guess it kind of depends on where you're located in the country. If you can't find that, you're screwed. You're going to blow up your engine. So that's why I have the supercharger that I chose has a clutch on it, and I can actually turn it all off and go right back to running normal parameters. Mm-hmm. I am also using, like Rick said, there's heat. Compressing air does generate heat, and so I'm using an intercooler as well. So you're cooling down that air. Yeah, it's going to reduce your airspeed. It's going to reduce the amount of air. Well, no, it's going to increase the amount of air, but It's reducing your airspeed. Is the density? The density.
Density.
There's a lot of science that goes into it. It's a real hoot.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, when you start to figure out the adiabatic lapse rate as you go up in altitude and the airspeed density and everything else, and then now you're going to have a computer with sensors to figure that all out. And then here you have a switch, you can turn it all off. I think that's brilliant myself. I like that.
Well, it's causing me a lot of trouble right now. It's making my programming way more complicated, but when it works, I'll be very happy because a sensor starts going awry. I can just turn off the supercharger. I can go into its factory limp mode or whatever it has, and I can save my engine.
No, I think that's really a smart way to do it. I've always wanted off switches for anything other than the ignition, right? There's your choices.
Need to rename your Jeep Mad Max.
Maybe. I do want to add one other thing. Oh, what was that? Sorry, Tyler.
You definitely need to have something sticking out of the hood.
Oh, yeah, all sorts of, who knows what, big cage around it. I did want to add one thing, and this is going way back to our fuel injection versus carburation argument. You can totally supercharge a carbureted engine, no doubt, but I would be a little bit more concerned about doing it. And I guess what I've seen is you can put your carburetor on top of the supercharger, which means you have an air-fuel mixture going through piping or whatever before it gets to the cylinder. And one little backfire is all it takes for that whole assembly to go kaboom.
That's right.
And so
you've ever seen
injection,
a blower explode on a racetrack and scatter everywhere? You haven't lived.
It's pretty epic.
It's epic indeed.
So maybe one thing, Rick and Liam, that you can touch on is like torque curves, because if we're out on the trail and we're doing the Rubicon like we just talked about, with a blower or with a turbo, and what that does, because I was looking up some of the specs on, for example, the new 2.0 Wrangler turbo 4-cylinder, and creates 270 horsepower. It reaches that at 5,000 RPM, so you're spinning the mill pretty hard. And it has 295 foot-pounds of torque, and it reaches that and kind of plateaus around 2,900 RPMs to I think like 4,500 RPMs. But when you're, say, doing the Rubicon, what are we doing on RPMs? We're down there in the 800 to 1,000. We're just low RPM crawling. You need that torque. So what does the a turbocharger or a supercharger do with that power curve at the very low RPMs?
Yeah, and actually I can touch on that one because so like I said before, the supercharger is going to work. I got this toy again. The supercharger is going to work in the lower RPMs a lot better because you can just instantly activate it. Now, I have the 2.5 liter 4-cylinder in my YJ. It is dramatically underpowered, and I know Tyler knows what I'm talking about because he has the same vehicle. However, when I'm in 4-low and first gear, I can do most obstacles just fine. It's when I start getting into deep sand or snow or longer hills is where I really, really need the power. And with a turbocharger or with a supercharger, you can run a bypass circuit, which is what I'm doing right now. And with that bypass circuit, you can actually turn off the boost more or less, which they'll run a little bit more efficiently because they're not trying to compress air. And then you can run at your stock parameters at that 800 to 1,000 RPM, where really you're just trying to get over a rock. The turbocharger, like I said before, if it's spinning and it doesn't get spooled up, say it's a larger turbo, till about 2,000 RPM, you might be trying to get over the rock, and then suddenly you have a lot more torque than you bargained for.
Yeah, you're over the rock.
Or you spit out all of your U-joints.
Yeah, you don't want that either. Yeah.
And speaking of U-joints, if we finished up Willys versus Wrangler, that's kind of a good way to move into toolbox talk. And this episode, we're talking about prep for Moab. And it's something you should do before any major off-road trip. And I think we're going to turn this over to Tyler and Greg and see what they've got to say.
Well, yeah, I'll lead right in. Prepping your vehicle for any off-road adventure or any long trip First thing I would say is, a visual inspection of your entire vehicle. Make sure that it's not leaking, it's not dripping, you don't find loose bolts. You want to visually inspect it to see where you need to spend your time. Also, check all your fluids, check everything. But then down to nut and bolting, a lot of people, I see this all over the internet and other places where they're always worried that their nuts and bolts are coming loose. Traditionally, your nuts and bolts won't come loose if you torqued them properly with a torque wrench. But it's still good to check them. And one trick that I do when I do a suspension or anything else, I put a paint mark across the bolt and onto the mating surface. So whether it's on the frame or a bracket on the axle or whatever it is, that way when you're doing your visual inspection, you can look, and if that paint line still lines up, that bolt hasn't moved. It hasn't become loose. It hasn't, done anything else. So check your fluids, check all your visual stuff. Make sure you don't have anything loose. I like to, there's certain things that you can't paint mark real well, like wheels. So I always put a torque wrench back on the wheels. Make sure your tire pressures are good. And then the biggest thing for an off-road trip, after you've inspected your vehicle, inspect your gear. When you're doing a trip across the country, it's really a big thing to make sure that you have your proper gear. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the middle of a trail and realized I left my welding leads at home for my onboard welder, and then it makes it really hard to use. So inspect your gear. Make sure that you've got, some of the nice tool rolls for wrenches and regular tools. Have the tools that you use on your vehicle with you. I keep a small spare set just for off-roading. Recovery gear, make sure you have your recovery gear. Make sure you have your water. Make sure you have your extra fluids. People think it's weird when you pull up and it takes you 10 minutes to dig for something. But the reason it takes you 10 minutes to dig for something is because you have it and you can use it. And then you're the guy fixing other people's rigs. So just be prepared, just like anything else in life. If you're prepared, you're good to go. But the first step is do a visual inspection. And then I always do an AAR. So kind of like an after action report. After I'm done with the trail, when I get back home, I go over everything again, which makes it a lot easier for the next trip. So when I get home, I'll do the visual inspection. I'll find anywhere that's scratched or dinged or has issues, and I can either decide to repair it then or make a mental note of it. That way, the next time you're ready for a trip, you're already pre-prepared. So, follow the 6P plan. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance. And then you're good. You got more to add, or did I cover enough of it, Tyler?
That's everything. We're done.
That's most of it. For you more modern Jeep owners with the MP231 transfer case, make sure you check that double cardan on the front drive shaft, because when if you take it in and get your oil changed at Jiffy Lube or whatever, very few shops know to grease that joint, and it will eat itself. And it is not an easy trail fix. So double check that double cardan on the front drive shaft. Make sure the U-joints are lubed up and in good shape on that. Reach under there, grab it, wiggle it around. The other thing I like to do, well, pretty much everything Greg said, you just go stem to stern, checking mostly tie rod ends, U-joints, grab things and shake them. Make sure everything's in good shape. Check your brake pads. The other thing I would do for these more, modern Jeeps, have a spare crank position sensor. You never know when those things are going to go out. And if it goes out, you are dead in the water. You're done. We actually had one go out on the Rubicon trail, and I have a little bag of electrical stuff that I take with me on trips. I keep a spare crank position sensor in that bag, and that saved our bacon. We were able to do that repair on the trail. Not easy, by the way, because you need like 16 socket extensions to reach it. But throw one of those in your bag. It can save your trip. The other thing I would say, would take a good first aid kit, not just a boo-boo kit, but an actual first aid kit. Something that's a little bit more serious than a box of Band-Aids. So pretty much Greg covered everything else.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say one thing that not everybody checks. That's the air pressure in your spare tire.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's on my list before I leave is fill spare tire because everyone forgets it and then it's flat. I have a question. Tyler, I have a Dana 35 rear axle in my Jeep. Should I bring a...
Spare Dana 44, yes.
Yeah.
I'm counting on you for that, Greg.
I'm so sorry, Liam. You're going to supercharge a Dana 35. You'll be doing an axle swap pretty soon.
Sweet. Should I bring an axle shaft to Moab?
I always bring spare front shafts. I used to bring spare rear shafts. I've got a Ford 9-inch now, a 31 spline Ford 9-inch, and I'm still rocking a 4-cylinder. So I'm never going to break that 9-inch rear end with my 4-cylinder.
Oh,
but I always bring.
Never say never.
Never say never.
Yeah. I bring spare front shafts. With the Dana 35, I would bring a spare rear shaft because that's a C-clip axle. If you break that axle, your tire is going to go right out the side and down the trail, and you're not.
We've all seen that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I bring one side.
One of the really good things about Moab, Liam, they have anticipated this for years. This is 55 years of like the Napa in town, they probably have a dozen of those shafts and C-clips and everything else. But just like Tyler said, if it breaks, it's going to walk out the side. And you can do the trick with ratchet straps and a high lift jack handle to kind of keep it in and get you off the trail. But you're pretty much going to guarantee you're going to incur a little body damage if you do that. So if you can bring a spare shaft, it's really well worth it. And I don't know your rear axle. Does it have a long side and a short side, or are they both equal?
I believe they're equal in the YJ.
Could be something to look into before.
Yeah, you better.
So, and I've told people that before, if you do have a long and a short, as long as you have a cutting tool, you can just bring the long and then it'll work for both sides. But with the
splines.
Yeah.
Hey, don't laugh. We have cut splines before on the trail.
Not so easy with the C-clip axle, though, because you got to cut the groove for the C-clip.
Mm-hmm. So here's the bottom line. Remember to bring anything that has broken before. Like if you break U-joints every time, you better have a spare with you.
Yep.
Certain items that are known for breaking, such as your axle, bring it. The other regular things like fan belts, back when we all had multiple fan belts, you should have those with you. If you run a serpentine belt, you should have one of those with you. These are things that are light and easy to take along, and it's kind of silly to be going out there without it. Like, surely you have at least 1 quart of gear oil, 1 quart of motor oil, 1 quart of ATF with you, correct?
Brake fluid.
Brake fluid, right. Regular stuff. These are some of your standard things that we'll probably have we could do an entire podcast on what to bring and what not to bring.
Yeah.
Generally, I don't bring a Pitman arm puller. I know people that do, mainly because there's plenty of JKs that we've seen with a twisted or broken off Pitman arm, and you don't go anywhere until you fix that. So if you have an extra arm and a Pitman arm puller, you're back on the trail. Likewise, I don't carry tools that don't fit my Jeep anymore. I used to, but then it was another 15 extra minutes of plowing through all that crap I didn't need to get what I did need.
Yep.
Yeah, and 25 or 30 extra pounds
Absolutely.
of gear. Yeah. And the key thing is, to me, don't wait until you're airing down at the trailhead to go through and start grabbing this stuff. Do this before you even leave home.
Yep. That's all prep. Get it done.
Well, I think that kind of wraps up Toolbox Talk, unless Chris has got something to add on that.
I would just reiterate what Tyler and Greg and probably Rick said, you said, is that check your steering and check your brakes. And not just before you leave and when you're done with the week in Moab. Check them every day, every morning before you go out. Those are 2 items that can and will kill you if they fail.
Yeah, stopping and steering are pretty important.
Very important.
Absolutely.
And steering. The other thing is, if it's that could, this has to do with vehicles, but if you're heading to Moab, get your maps. Kind of plan out your week. You can get great maps at the Sporting Goods Shop, which is right next to City Market, right next to the gas station there. And then double check on the days on the trail that are exclusive use permits with Red Rock 4-wheelers. So between everything that everybody covered, it's like I think you got the whole week in Moab sorted out. One thing, this doesn't have to do with steering or brakes. Has to do with if you're camping, don't forget your camp stove. Like I did 2 weeks ago when I was out in the Nevada desert. Showed up and I started pulling all my gear out, and I'm like, where? Okay. It was no big deal. I just cooked made fire and cooked on the coals on the fire. But yeah.
That is develop a list. My dad was a big backpacker in the 70s, and he had a backpacking list, and it was a little checklist. And if you and every trip that he'd come back, if he needed something and didn't have it, he'd add it to the list. If he went on several trips and had something on the list he never used, he might take it off. Have a kind of a living spreadsheet packing list. And then don't check that stuff off until you are on your final pack, putting it in the Jeep, and then check it off. Because you just won't remember stuff.
Yeah, and the older we get, the worse it is. Mike?
Yeah.
I was going to mention the winch because there's been a couple times I'm like, yep, there it is, right there on the front bumper. Here we go. And then you get out there and find out the controller, or when you go to pull it out 48 feet and hook it up, then you click and the solenoid burn out, and etc. So run your cable out, wrap it up nice and tight, make sure your controller's with you, that kind of thing. But you see it on the front bumper and you think, yep, there it is. Here we go.
Yeah, they should be cycled, at least once or twice a year. Cycle it before you put it away for the winter, and cycle it before you get it out for next wheeling season, just to make sure everything's good to go. And speaking of that, if you're running synthetic rope, make sure that that's all in good condition, and same with steel cable. Yeah.
There's a whole nother podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. To that point, you said the solenoid. That reminded me, if you are like me and you are a self-proclaimed master electrician engineer, and you decided to design and build your very own electric cooling fans, pack extra relays and fuses because you probably undersized the wire again, and you're probably going to have to reroute it on the side of a mountain in Colorado, thousands of miles from anyone you know again, and you might blow up your radiator in Moab again. So make sure to pack anything that you DIY'd, bring extra, because you probably DIY'd it wrong.
So learn from experience.
So that kind of does it for that. I think we're going to close out this episode with Rick and All Jeep All the Time. What have you got for us? What are your musings, your thoughts, your...
Well, okay. So we've talked all about how to prep for Moab, how to prep for a trail, get this ready, get that ready. And that's all important stuff. I think more important than that is don't be a doofus on the trail. Don't be that guy that's attacking the hill time and time and time again until the U-joint spews out from underneath. Your drive shaft's flopping around and you roll backwards and nearly tip over and kill the other dogs and kids and Jeeps down on the trail. Don't be that guy. It's simple. You have the power, I'm not talking about engine power, but right up here, hooked to your foot. You have the power not to purposely or ego-driven or alcohol-driven or whatever else. You have the power to prevent that stuff from happening. You don't need to be that guy or gal that breaks down on the trail because of their own stupidity, honestly, and inconvenience everybody else. We've seen it time and time again. We've probably all done it once or twice ourselves before. Oh, watch this. And it has nothing to do with beer. But everybody else is going to be looking negatively at you when you're upside down on fire because you just wouldn't quit. There's a lot of times when there's rules on certain hills. 3 times you get to try it. After that, you get the wind chuck because there's 5 or 50 people behind you that want to do the same thing and have the same amount of fun. So be respectful of everybody on a trail. And there's always somebody else on the trail because remember, you're not supposed to be out there by yourself. Because when you're out there by yourself and you do the same thing, yes, you could die. So there's my musings on don't be that guy or gal out on the trail being stupid. Simple as that.
Yeah, well, upside down and on fire makes for great video content and photos. It's just not the right thing to do. You have nothing to prove. Mm-hmm. And especially when you're in a group-led trail environment, such as Red Rock Four-Wheelers leading Easter Jeep Safari trails, be respectful of everybody there. Everybody's out there to have a good time. 3 tries and either take the go around or take the assistance and live to Jeep another day.
Yeah.
Those trails are always going to be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How many have been upside down on fire? Oh, okay. Well, anyway.
I've been on fire, but not while I was upside down. I've been upside down, but not on fire.
There you go. So you got to watch yourself. Even just sideways can be dangerous. And we want to see all of you out on the trail, happy, healthy, and hungry as we make our manifold burritos for you someday.
I think we should have on our Thursday Gone Jeep and Trail ride, our team ride, we should have like a cook-off. Yeah.
I think we will.
Right.
I've been sitting here during the course of this hour plus that we've been Jack John around, and I've got some ideas. Hopefully I can wow you. I fed you well in camp a few months ago, and now maybe I can rival Jim Huff with some good food. I'm not going to attempt barbecue. I may attempt his green chili cheddar hot dogs, though, because those are pretty tasty.
I want to see someone do a turkey.
Oh, well, no,
maybe turkey breast.
I'll do turkey breasts.
Yeah.
I mean, a whole turkey.
I'm going to need a bigger boat. I mean, engine.
How about a bigger hood? I can put a flathead engine in a 3B. That much room extra.
It would have to be a small turkey.
And a long day.
A very long day.
Long day.
I know.
How about Cornish game hens instead?
There you go.
That's the same. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that'll work.
I don't know. Greg,
I'm getting hungry, guys.
Ribeye or something on there. Whatever. You can get a small turkey in there.
Well, yeah, I got an almost 30-hour drive from Michigan to Moab. I can cook just about anything on the trip.
Give it a try. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining in. Hopefully, we've got a few new viewers, listeners out there that enjoy what we're doing. Stay tuned for episode 6 coming up. Right?
Yeah, episode 6. We're going to record it in Moab. Stay tuned to our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram. We'll probably put something up on YouTube. We will be doing some live broadcasts from down there. And we're going to have a couple of pop-up spots where you guys can come and ask your questions in person.
So make sure you like, share, and subscribe.
We'll see you guys in Moab. I'm Tracy Clark, your co-host for the Gone Jeepin' Show.
And I'm Rick Payway. Thanks again for joining us.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you guys. See you in Moab, everybody.
On the next episode of the Gone Jeepin' Show, we'll have lockers before light bars, where we will answer some of our fans' questions. Willys versus Wrangler. Rick Payway faces off against the new guys, old school versus modern technology. And Trailside, where we will discuss some of our favorite trails and trips we'd like to take. Thanks for joining us on the Gone Jeepin' Show. We'll see you at the next episode. We're all Jeep all the time.